Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up everybody? It is Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about the second album by my second favorite artist of all time. From 1969, this album is often referred to as Space Oddity by British music, fashion, and pop culture icon, the immortal David Bowie. David Bowie was born on January 8th, 1947 in London, England. He released his first solo album in June of 1967. And what followed for the next almost 50 years was, at least in my opinion, one of the most remarkable careers in the history of mankind. Now, I first sort of became aware of David Bowie, apart from just having heard the name my whole life as a kid. I first really became aware of David Bowie myself as probably a 10 or 11, maybe 12-year-old kid via the MTV, which is how I discovered a lot of the music I got into as a kid. But I first discovered David Bowie on MTV. I remember it was when I first saw his video for the song Ashes to Ashes. It was the first time that I was really able to associate that name with any sort of sound or image or music especially. And I just really loved the song even as kind of a little kid. And I do remember more than anything just being amazed by the music video for Ashes to Ashes. Of course, it has the whole Wizard of Oz aesthetic. And I was just completely blown away by the video. And even still to this day, that having been really my first real exposure to David Bowie as a song, I would say that is probably still my favorite David Bowie song of all time. Now, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you that it's necessarily the best song of all time of his, but I think it is my favorite song of his just based on that experience with it. My next real sort of exposure to David Bowie that I remember as a kid also was back in 1986. Of course, as you all know, he starred in the Jim Henson movie Labyrinth. I do remember that I went and saw this movie in the theater as a kid. I was a huge Jim Henson Muppet nerd when I was a kid. My favorite fantasy movie of all time is still The Dark Crystal. Of course, I loved The Labyrinth. As a kid, I loved everything about it. Really still do. I still think that is one of the greatest movies ever made. Now, I might have to take issue with the soundtrack a little bit, but that's me just being a little snippety, isn't it? An interesting fact about The Labyrinth, however, is down here, a couple hours south of where I am right now in Nashville. There's a town called Scottsboro, Alabama, which is literally really in the middle of nowhere. But in the town of Scottsboro, Alabama, there is a place called the Unclaimed Baggage Center, which is basically what it sounds like. It is a place that airlines send baggage, luggage, or whatever, that goes unclaimed at airports all around the country. Now, I have no idea why it goes to this town in the middle of literally nowhere in central Alabama, but that's where it is. But if you ever find yourself down in Scottsboro, Alabama, or in that region, I would definitely check out the Unclaimed Baggage Center. The place is cool. It's a giant thrift, almost mall. You can find a lot of stuff there that's pretty good quality, because a lot of it's stuff that people probably weren't intending on donating. But one of the most interesting things that you can find at the Unclaimed Baggage Center, if you're a fan of the Labyrinth movie, is you can find the puppet for the character Hoggle. I don't know how he ended up there. I don't know why he went unclaimed at some airport somewhere. But apparently he did, and he is now living at the Unclaimed Baggage Center in Scottsboro, Alabama. There's actually, you walk in the front door and there's a glass case of a few sort of famous collectibles. There are a few famous collectibles throughout the the store. But as soon as you walk in the front door, there's a giant glass case, and Hoggle is sitting right there. And actually, when they found him, he was in quite the state of disrepair. So there's a whole video, little mini documentary of how they restored him, how they brought him back to his former glory, and how he is living at the Unclaimed Baggage Center in Scottsboro, Alabama. That place is awesome. Just a little bit of Labyrinth trivia. You probably knew that already, though, right? Anyway, my real sort of personal interest in David Bowie, the first time I sort of became really interested in him as a fan or as somebody who was was in 1995. I remember distinctly hearing the David Bowie album Outside, which did catch my ear. It was definitely the new album at the time. Now, as a lot of you know, as a lot of everybody who's into music knows, at the time, one of the biggest artists in music was Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor. And I felt like a lot of artists were sort of coming out in that same sort of pseudo-industrial, electronic kind of vein. And for me, Outside was David Bowie's sort of taking a shot at that kind of genre. And, David Bowie was really a master of everything. So, of course, it sounded as good as any of that style of music ever sounded to me. Later that year, of course, David Bowie famously went out on tour with Nine Inch Nails, which, if you were of my generation, it really brought him back into relevance. Not that David Bowie was ever irrelevant. He's never been irrelevant a day in his life. But for people of my age, my generation, I think it brought him back into sort of mass relevance. It definitely piqued my interest in him, not because of the association with Nine Inch Nails. I've never been a Nine Inch Nails fan. I wasn't then. I am not now. Sorry if that offends you. It's just a matter of personal preference. But I do remember that was around the time I became intrigued by David Bowie. Of course, I had heard a few of his songs on MTV, and I made the decision as a young music fan, somebody who at the time I thought I was developing pretty decent taste in music. I thought I need to get a David Bowie album. I'll get a David Bowie album. We'll call it good. Every music fan should own a David Bowie album. So at some point in time, I went into one of my local record stores, and I found a copy of Ziggy Stardust, which was the first David Bowie album I ever bought on CD at the time. And the reason why I chose that one specifically, I remember, because it was the album, even in my amateur-ish fandom, it was the album at the time that I had heard the most about. I thought it was the most celebrated. I thought, well, if you're going to only own one David Bowie album, which was sort of my plan at the time, I thought, why not own Ziggy Stardust? This is probably the most iconic record of his catalog. Little did I know at the time that I was about to embark on a huge musical journey, because I took that record home and I listened to it. And as I'm sure you can imagine, it just totally blew me away. It was greater than I had ever expected. And I had fairly lofty expectations when I bought that album because of how celebrated it is. I took it home, I listened to it, and very slowly from that point forward, I began to slowly build my David Bowie fandom. David Bowie is not one of those artists, in my opinion. I'm only speaking for myself, but David Bowie is not one of those artists, at least in my opinion, that you can just buy one album and be like, hey, I'm a David Bowie fan. It takes time. You have to immerse yourself. It's a very arduous process going through his catalog, because his catalog, for one thing, is just massive, just in volume. But it is just so incredibly unique, diverse. I mean, every album is an experience unique in itself. And at least for me, in my experience, when I first started listening to David Bowie, it was a very slow process. I bought an album, I immersed myself in it. It was sort of like me, it was like kind of walking out into a natural body of sort of murky water. You know, you take steps, you kind of feel your way as you go, and then you kind of go from there. That was my experience listening to David Bowie, becoming a fan. It took a long time before I really considered myself a fan. And even now, honestly, like 30 years in to my fandom, as much as I love him, I do consider him to be, you know, my second favorite artist of all time. I still am not one of those people who thinks I have all the answers. Read books, I've seen documentaries, I've listened to the entire catalog countless times, and I'm still one of those people. I feel like with David Bowie, I have more questions than answers. When I first decided I wanted to do this video on this channel, and I've been wanting to get into David Bowie for a long time, I'm intimidated by it. I am. Because there's just so much to know. There's so much to talk about. You know, what hasn't been said? What hasn't been analyzed? What do I have to say that's unique in this conversation? But like I said, over the last 30 years, I don't even know if I could tell you. I've been trying to do a thing lately, and I'm still working on it. I will eventually finish it, where I've been trying to rank the David Bowie catalog, but man, it is so hard. I mean, I could even tell you after 30 years decisively which is my favorite album at this point in time. Now, for a long time, I've always kind of thought it was Hunky Dory. That's one that I go back to all the time. I love that record. I love so many of the records. But lately, I haven't been listening to Hunky Dory that much. Even within David Bowie's catalog, I find myself going through phases. Like recently, I just kind of came out of a phase where I was listening to pinups all the time. And you go back and you try to like reanalyze it, relearn it. And every time you listen to these albums, you get something new from it. Every time you hear these songs you haven't heard in years or months or whatever, you pick something new up. It's just absolutely incredible. The the catalog lately, I've been really going through a phase of listening to the trilogy, which is a phase I come back to quite often. I love those albums. I love the trilogy, especially Low right now. Low is what I've been just really geeking out on. Now, I wouldn't say that Low is my favorite album, but I love it. It's probably my favorite album of the trilogy. But as you go through and you listen to David Bowie's catalog, you start to realize there was really not any sort of musical genre that he didn't at least dabble in, whether it was British invasion, folk, psychedelic, pop, punk, new wave, industrial. I mean, he really kind of did a little bit of everything, and he did it better than almost everybody, with one exception. I do remember recently somebody was like, "Are you trying to tell me that Morrissey is better than David Bowie?" I said, "Yes, I am, sir. I mean, I'm the host of Morrissey Monday here. What do you expect me to say to that?" Anyway, in 2003, I believe it was, I got to see David Bowie live one time. I only got to see David Bowie live one time. It was on the Reality Tour. And I went with the girlfriend I had at the time. Now, her and I were both relatively big David Bowie fans, and neither of us had ever seen him before. So we took the opportunity to spend a little bit more, well, a lot more actually, and we got ourselves pretty good seats. We made it a conscious decision that if we were going to go and do it right. We got ourselves, really good seats. We weren't like right in the very front, but we were really very happy with our seats. And I remember I wasn't, and I'm still not really the hugest fan of the Reality album. If I were to rank the the David Bowie catalog, which I am working on, it's going to be probably towards the lower half or third of the catalog, to be honest with you. I didn't think it was a bad album. It's not offensively bad. But I was so excited to go again. This was at the time, it was the first time I was ever going to see David Bowie. It was the only time I ever got a chance to see him. We had good seats. We're locked in. We're loaded. We're ready to go. And I remember the band came out. He came out. And pretty much immediately I was just mesmerized by him, just by his physical presence. Looking back on it, I was so completely starstruck when he walked out on stage. I just was obsessing over the fact, first off, I could not take my eyes off of him. I don't know anything else that went on during the whole show, basically. I could not take my eyes off of him. I was completely just obsessing over the fact that is Ziggy Stardust. That is the Thin White Duke. That is Aladdin Sane. That is the guy. Now, the show was good. I honestly, to be honest with you, I was so distracted the whole time by how starstruck I was. I really couldn't tell you that much about the show. I think the show was good. I had a really great time. But the whole time I was just blown away by how starstruck I was. I couldn't get over it. I couldn't get past it. Now, I've been to other shows, and I don't care who you are. If you're a music fan, there are some artists that you're starstruck over. It's just reality. I don't care how much of a pompous ass you are. There are some people in which you feel starstruck in front of. I remember a good example for me is I saw Motorhead 4 times over the years throughout their career. Now, I'm not even really the biggest Motorhead fan in the world. I'm a casual fan. I'm not a diehard fan. I don't claim to be. I never would claim to be. But every time I went to go see Motorhead, when Lemmy would walk out on stage, you can't help but be like starstruck. That's Lemmy. That's really him. And of course, after a few songs, it wears off and you kind of get into the show. And Motorhead were always good live if you like them. I mean, they were loud. Every time I left a Motorhead show, I couldn't help but think, how has Lemmy done this every day for 40 years without his ears just like, fuck you, man, we're leaving. But with another example was when I saw the Ramones, the one time I saw the Ramones. Joey Ramone came out on stage and I could feel my mouth just drop open. But within a matter of a few songs, I kind of got over it and I got into the show. Now, that show wasn't very good. I've told you that before. I think I've told you that before on this channel. The Ramones weren't great live, but I was 20, 21 years old. I didn't care. I was seeing some of my heroes standing right in front of me. But when I went to go see David Bowie in 2003, that feeling never left. It was weird to sit there and watch him and think he's actually like a person. That's weird. He's not even human. He doesn't tie his shoes in the morning. He doesn't fart. He doesn't wake up in the morning and have to take a big, nasty sit down. He's like not one of us. And it was sort of weird to see him in person, and it as just a human. It kind of humanized him a little bit to me, but I never got over my my gawking at him the whole show. It distracted me, honestly, from the show. So I think the show was good. I don't honestly remember that much about it. I am glad that this DVD exists, the Reality Tour DVD, because it does create a permanent record of the show. This is not the show I was at. Of course, this was recorded in Dublin, Ireland. Great DVD, by the way. So if I saw a show that was as good as this one, it was good. I don't remember much of it because I was too distracted by my fanboy-ness. Several years later, I worked with a girl, and she was much younger than I was at the time. I think she was like 18 or 19 years old. She was just like obsessed with David Bowie. She would come in, obsessed with David Bowie. Maybe one of the most obsessed people with an artist I've ever met. But she used to come into work. She'd have like the Aladdin Sane makeup on sometimes. And I remember I told her, I was like, oh yeah, I saw him in 2003 on the Reality Tour. She like freaked out. Oh my God, She's like, yeah, tell me about it. Tell me everything about it. And I felt like a total dolt because I told her, I was like, honestly, I don't remember. I was just distracted by what a stupid fanboy I am. And it was good. I do remember he played Ashes to Ashes. I do remember that. But I thought the show was good. But like I said, it was weird to see him three-dimensional like that. He's such an icon. It was hard for me to like get over it. I know I'm repeating myself here. Anyway, in 2016, January of 2016, of course, sadly, David Bowie passed away. Now, this was not a good day for me. I'm assuming it was not a good day for you. It was not a good day for anybody who is any sort of music fan. And I think for me personally, part of it that was not a good day, none of it was a good day, but I was completely, taken off guard by this. I had no idea really that he was sick at all. I had no idea at all that he was as ill as he was. It completely caught me off guard. I'm not going to lie, but I don't know why this is something that this is a trait that I have. You might have it as well, but sometimes with certain celebrities, when they go, I take it really hard. And David Bowie was one that just devastated me. Like I said, at the time, I had no idea he was as sick as he was or ill at all. It wasn't until after he passed away, I listened to Black Star for the first time, I listened to it for the first time after he passed away. And hearing that album, I was like, oh, now it makes sense. Black Star, if you haven't heard it, I'm sure you have if you're watching this video. Black Star, for me, is not only my favorite album of 2016, it's one of my favorite albums of that entire decade, but man, it is a tough listen. I always tell people, that album is so good that it's hard to listen to, because you're basically listening to somebody document their demise, somebody that you love, admire, borderline fanboy worship. Not a good day for me when David Bowie passed away. Not a good day, really, for anybody who's a music fan. I did read a quote one time right after David Bowie passed away that I liked. It said that David Bowie picked up where the Beatles left off. And I like the imagery of that quote. I like thinking of the Beatles coming up to David Bowie in 1967, 1969, whenever, saying, hey kid, we've taken this thing from I Want to Hold Your Hand to Abbey Road. They pass him the baton and they say, why don't you steer the ship for the next little while? And David Bowie took it and he ran with it. And he took music, of course, into completely uncharted territories. I've always loved that quote. Now, I'm not the biggest Beatles fan of all time. Never have been. Sorry. I think they're okay. They're fine. The Beatles are fine. But they are not the greatest band of all time. They're not even really the greatest band from their hometown. So, figure it out. Anyway, let's get into this album a little bit. The album is David Bowie's second album from 1969, often referred to as Space Oddity. Now, I have two copies of this album. I have this one right here, which is, I believe, this is the 2019 remaster version of this album. I really like this album. I like the album cover enough. It's not necessarily my favorite album cover in the Bowie catalog, but what I love about this one is the art on the back. I mean, it's a lot to take in. Man, I love this one. People say, well, why do you still collect records? This is what I say. This is my reason right here. This is why you still collect records, because you can't get this off of Spotify. And also I have this copy right here, which I have had for quite a long time. This is my original copy my original copy at least. It's kind of hard to see because it still has some of the original shrink wrap on it underneath the protective seal. I love the artwork on this record. I've always loved this back picture. And this front cover is one of my favorite album covers. Really, in the entire catalog, I love the font up here. And if you're a nerd like me, you can see that on the original shrink wrap, there's an old Tower Records sticker left. Tower Records, tier. Love that place, man. I don't care. I loved it. Of course, this is not, as you know, this is not 1969 David Bowie. This is 1972 David Bowie. This was more 1969 David Bowie. But, you get it. I love both of these. But, this is an album. Generally, I really like a lot. This album came out on November 14th, 1969. It was produced by Tony Visconti and Gus Dudgeon. I really like this album. Now, you can't accurately say that anything in David Bowie's catalog is underappreciated because it's all appreciated. We all get it. But within his catalog, I think that this is one of the maybe lesser appreciated albums. It's definitely not one of the most iconic. Of course, it has the iconic title track. But this is a record I really love. It was such a huge departure from the 1967 solo debut, the self-titled debut album, which I love that record too. I love the 1967 self-titled record. I will do a video on that at some point in time. I know you're so excited. But I really love this record. It isn't necessarily one of his best, but I really like it. Of course, the album kicks off side one, track one with the title track, Space Oddity. One of the most iconic songs in his entire catalog. On this record, you could argue one of the most iconic songs in his catalog. I would argue one of the most iconic songs in the history of rock and roll. I love this song. Everybody loves this song. I don't care how many times you've heard it. I could hear this song 100 million times and never get tired of it. Another thing about this album I wanted to touch on real quick is this thing is almost 54 years old, or is 54 years old this month. And this thing still sounds current and fresh. There's not really 1 second on this album that sounds dated. And again, the song Space Oddity, I mean, if you don't love that song, then I don't know what to tell you. I don't care how jaded you are. Space Oddity is still one of the best songs in his catalog. It's one of the best songs off this record, not the best, but one of the best. The second song is Unwashed and Somewhat Slightly Dazed. I really like this song a lot. It's kind of a pop folk style. I really love the lyrics of this song. It's dark. If I had to make one complaint or two complaints, I guess, about this song, and I like it, I would say that the tail of this song, the last couple minutes, is a little bit too long. I think it'd be better if they kind of cut it a little bit short. That's just my personal preference. And another thing is, there's a little bit too much harmonica on this song. I am somebody, man, I'm real picky about the harmonica. I'm not going to lie. It's not my favorite thing in the world. If a harmonica gets used, I'm not a big fan. Even in the Smith song Hand in Glove, I could live without the harmonica. That's just personal preference. Don't think I'm being too judgy. But I would cut the tail of this song off and maybe cut the harmonica back. I'm not saying get rid of it, just cut it back a little bit. I love the production on this record also, by the way. I love how this record sounds. Man, it's just still so good. The third song on side one is a song called Letter to Hermine. I love this little song. It's a little folk song. It's only about 2 minutes long. I love the lyrics. It's a dark song. I think it's a love song about unrequited love. This album actually gets relatively dark. I think that this is a pretty dark record. for the most part. I love the song Letter to Hermione. Side 1 ends with a big old thick juicy steak, 10 minutes of Signet Committee. I do like this song. This song is sort of a psychedelic folk song, but I really like it. It's dark, it's longing, it's lonely. Now, I've said this on this channel before, I'll say it again. I'm not somebody who has this giant, huge love affair with songs that are typically this long, but this song does keep you interested. It at least keeps keeps your interest through the whole thing. Now, I do think it's a little bit too long. It's not necessarily my favorite song on the record, but I do like it, especially considering I'm not always a fan of the epic songs. But I love this song. It's dark, it's lonely, it's longing. I like it. Side 2 starts with a song called Janine. Man, I like this song a lot. Sort of a pop folk song. He loves this girl, but he's not completely sure if he can be himself around her. Is it that he's insecure in himself? Is it that he doesn't trust her? And it raises the question, at least to me, do we really know what is living behind other people's eyes? I love the song Janine. Again, it's dark. It's a little bit self-conscious, self-deprecating. I really like that song a lot. The second song on side 2 is called An Occasional Dream. This is like a psychedelic pop song. I really like it. I love the lyrics. It is dreamy. It's very spacey, maybe a little bit flighty. I really like this song. Again, it's only like a little 3-minute sort of psychedelic pop song. One thing I really love about this album is the way that he kind of goes back and forth between sort of pop folk and pop psychedelic. It's a really interesting combination, but it's very 1969. I love it. Not saying 1969 as in it's dated either, so just so you know. But I love the music style on this. The next song is The Wild-Eyed Boy from Free Cloud. I really love this song. This is one of my favorite songs on the record. Like Space Oddity, it is a fictional tale, but the story is about being kind of an outsider, somebody who feels like they live on the outskirts of society, something that is very relatable to people like me and people that are more introverted, quiet, somebody who are more maybe like observers. I really love the song Wild-Eyed Boy from Free Cloud. One of my favorite songs on the record, easily. The next song is a song which appears on this version of the album. Like I said, this is the 2019 remaster, but it is not on this one. It was not on the original. And I can't really understand why, because it is my favorite song on this album. It is the song Conversation Piece. The song was recorded for the Space Oddity album, but it wasn't released until 1970 as the B-side for the song Prettiest Star. This is my favorite song on the record, and if I had an opportunity ever to interview David Bowie, not that he would remember, but I would ask him, why did Conversation Piece get left off the original version of Space Oddity? Because this song is one of the most beautiful, perfectly written songs in the entirety of Bowie's catalog. Anybody who is, again, introverted, confirmed loner, somebody who feels like they live on the edges of our culture, this is their song. The first time I heard this song, man, I selfishly speaking, I thought this song was written just for me. I love it. It is the best song on this record. For me, this is probably, this is probably a top 10 for me in Bowie's entire catalog. Conversation Piece. If you haven't heard it, go back and listen to the 2019 remaster. I'm sure you've heard it. I'm not saying it as if you haven't, but it is the best song from 1969. Man. That song is the balls! Next song is God Knows I'm Good. This is a folk sort of style song. A little pop folk song, like 3 minutes long. Sort of up-tempo. I like the song. I like the lyrics again. Dark. This whole album, I think, kind of has a dark undertone. And the album ends with a song called Memory of a Free Festival. Probably, I don't know, I hate to say this, but I think arguably my least favorite song on this album. It's good. I mean, there's nothing bad on this album. Just to clarify. But Memory of a Free Festival is probably my least favorite song on the album. If I had to pick one, it starts off very sort of psychedelic, very carnival-y, but yet very slow tempo, and the song moves very slowly for about the first 2/3 of it. And then it sort of melts into this almost euphoric sort of party festival type atmosphere. I don't dislike it. I think it's a good way to end the album. But if I had to pick a least favorite song off this record, it would be Memory of a Free Festival. But really, there's nothing bad on this album. This is not necessarily one of the best in his catalog. I mean, they're all the best in some ways. They're all unique. They're all different. And I really do love Space Oddity. As I said a little bit earlier, I've been very intimidated by the idea of getting into the Bowie catalog. He is my second favorite artist of all time. So hopefully I'll get more into it after I sort of get past this speed bump. I mean, doing these videos is a lot of fun for me. I'm still not completely comfortable sitting in front of this camera and blabbing. But I do appreciate you checking out my thoughts on the David Bowie second album from 1969, Space Oddity. On a personal note, real quickly, I'd like to mention that this channel hit its first landmark earlier this week, reaching 50 subscribers. Now, I realize that, talking about having 50 subscribers could be seen as being pathetic and a little bit silly, but I do appreciate it. I want to thank everybody that has subscribed to this channel. And if you're watching this video and you aren't subscribed, thanks anyway. I appreciate it. I appreciate anybody watching these videos. I have fun with it. It is not me in my natural habitat. I try to make these videos as often as I can, but sometimes I kind of get in my own way with this brain that I live in. But I want you to know I really do appreciate it. 50 subscribers, that's awesome, man. Honestly, I didn't expect that. And when we reach maybe, hopefully, the next milestone, I probably will not expect that either. But anyway, man, thank you so much, really, for checking out this video. This is Archaic Records. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Be sure to go out and support your local record store. Check back every week for Morrissey Monday, my weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, and other record content throughout the week. And again, thank you so much for the 50 subscribers. I'm pretty stoked about it, not gonna lie to you. Anyway, man, until next time, my friends, I'll talk to you then.